All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into something that, let's be honest, can be a little intimidating.
Mhm.
Credit reports. But you guys have sent in some seriously interesting stuff about common errors. And I have to admit, I'm actually kind of excited to unravel this mystery.
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that's more fascinating than people realize. It's like your credit report is this super important document, right? It holds so much power over your financial life, but it's not always accurate, and that's where things get tricky.
Okay, yeah, that's a bit unsettling. It's like this hidden scorecard that can make or break your dreams. And we don't even know if it's right.
Pretty much. But luckily, we're here to break it all down, not just how to spot those sneaky errors, but also like why these reports matter so much, how they work, the bigger picture, stuff like that.
What you mean beyond just getting a good interest rate on a loan? I thought that was the main point of credit reports.
Well, yeah, that's a big part of it, but it actually goes way beyond that. Like, did you know that landlords might check your report before they rent you an apartment? And some employers even use it as part of their hiring process, especially for jobs that deal with, money.
Wow, seriously, I had no idea. So it's not just about loans. It can affect where you live, your job.
Exactly. It's about opportunities. It's about your overall financial well-being, and that's why understanding those common errors is so important because they can have real consequences.
Okay, so let's dive into those errors. What are some of the big ones that trip people up?
Well, one that we see a lot is identity errors. And it's not just a misspelled name, it can be a wrong address, or even worse, someone else's social security number accidentally getting attached to your report.
Oh man, that sounds like a total nightmare. Like suddenly someone else's financial baggage becomes yours.
It's kind of like that, yeah. And it can actually happen. Another frequent offender is account errors. These are accounts that just don't belong to you, like maybe incorrect balances or even closed accounts that keep popping up like financial zombies.
A financial haunting. I'm starting to feel like I need to check my credit report as often as I check my bank account.
Well, regular checkups are definitely a good idea. And then there's the classic late payment error. You know that feeling when you see that 30 days late mark next to a bill you swore you paid on time?
Oh, tell me about it. I once had a late payment for like a $5 library fine. Turned out it was a processing error, but
Yeah.
still, mini panic attack for sure.
It's crazy how much power those little numbers hold, right? And speaking of feeling powerless, we can't forget about duplicate accounts. Like, it's one thing to have a debt listed, but to have it counted twice, that's just not fair.
Yeah, from the sources you sent, it seems like that happens more often than we think.
More than you'd think. And then there's this sneaky one, incorrect credit limits. It might not seem like a big deal, but it can really mess with your credit utilization ratio.
Okay, I'm going to be honest, I'm a little lost on that one.
Mhm.
Can you explain why an incorrect credit limit matters so much?
Sure. So let's say you have a credit card with a $5,000 limit, but your report says it's only $2,000. Even if you only spend $500, it'll look like you're using a quarter of your available credit. But in reality, you're only using 10%.
Ah, I see. It's all about perception. Even if you're being responsible, the report makes it look different. It's like wearing the wrong size clothes, it just doesn't fit right.
Exactly. That's such a good analogy, and that's why it's so crucial to understand these errors because they can have a real impact on how lenders see you.
Okay, so we've uncovered this whole world of potential credit report errors, but the big question is, how do these errors even happen in the first place? It's kind of a mystery, right?
It is. It's kind of a mix of things. Human error is a big one. Think about how much data these credit bureaus handle. It's insane.
Right, and it's still humans inputting a lot of that data, so mistakes are bound to happen, even with the best systems in place.
Totally. But technology itself isn't always perfect either. We've all had those computer glitch moments, right? Sometimes systems just do their own thing, and unfortunately, that can mess with our credit reports too.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like when autocorrect changes sent to sent, and suddenly your professional email sounds like a perfume ad.
Exactly. Those little glitches can have big consequences. And then there's the scarier side of things. Fraud. Someone could be trying to open accounts in your name, and that's when it gets really serious.
Okay, that's definitely a good reason to check your credit report regularly. It's like doing a security sweep of your financial life, making sure everything is where it should be.
Exactly. It's like we're your security detail for this deep dive, helping you spot any red flags or suspicious activity.
All right, so let's say I'm diligently checking my report, and boom, I find an error. What's the game plan? How do I even begin to tackle this?
First things first, don't panic. It's more common than you think, and the good news is you have the power to dispute those errors. The sources you sent actually lay out a really clear process, almost like a roadmap to credit report justice.
Okay, so I'm intrigued. What's step one on this roadmap? Where do I even begin?
Step one is knowledge, right? You need to get a copy of your credit report from each of the big three credit bureaus. That's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Wait, hold on. 3 different reports. That sounds a bit overwhelming. Why do I need 3 separate ones?
That's a great question. Basically, each credit bureau collects and reports information independently, so they might have slightly different data on you. Think of it like getting a second opinion from a doctor.
Okay, that makes sense. So for a complete picture of my credit health, I need to check all 3 reports. But isn't that going to cost a fortune?
Not at all. You're actually entitled to a free credit report from each bureau every single year. You can get them at annualcreditreport.com. And here's a pro tip. You can stagger those requests throughout the year to keep a more frequent eye on things.
That's brilliant. So, like, I could get 1 report every 4 months, keeping things fresh and updated.
Exactly. And once you've got those reports, it's time to put on your detective hat and really examine them.
Okay, I'm ready to channel my inner Sherlock Holmes. What should I be looking for when I'm going through these reports?
Look for anything that seems off, discrepancies, inconsistencies, anything that just doesn't look right. Highlight those potential errors and then start gathering your evidence. This could be payment confirmations, bank statements, any documentation that can support your claim.
So it's like building a case file for my credit report. This is getting exciting.
It is. And once you've got your evidence, it's time to take action. You can dispute the error directly with the credit bureau. You can do it online, by mail, or even by phone, whatever works best for you.
Wow, options. But no matter how I choose to dispute it, I'm guessing clarity is key, right?
Absolutely. The sources you send really emphasize this. Write a good dispute letter. Don't just complain vaguely. You got to be specific. Detail the error, explain why you think it's wrong, and provide all that supporting documentation you gathered.
Okay, got it. No rambling emails or angry phone calls. I need to be precise and professional. Present a clear and concise argument. It's like a courtroom drama, but for my credit report.
I love that. And just like in a courtroom, patience is key. Once you've submitted your dispute, the credit bureau has 30 days to investigate.
Okay, so it's a waiting game. But what happens if the bureau doesn't resolve the issue in my favor? What are my options then?
Well, you're not out of luck. You can escalate the dispute, provide additional evidence, or even involve the creditor directly. Sometimes it takes a little persistence, but remember, you have rights when it comes to your credit report.
So I shouldn't give up easily. If I'm confident I'm right, I need to stand my ground and fight for my credit.
You got it. It's your financial reputation on the line, and you deserve to make sure it's accurate.
Okay, I'm feeling empowered already. But before we get ahead of ourselves, any other insider tips or strategies I should know about before jumping into this whole dispute process?
Yeah, actually, there are a few key things the sources highlighted. First up, screenshots. If you're disputing online, document every step of the way with screenshots. Think of it as like creating a digital paper trail just in case you need it later.
Like taking pictures of a crime scene, preserving the evidence.
Exactly. You want to be able to show what you did if anything goes wrong. And speaking of proactive measures, make checking your credit report a yearly ritual, especially if you're planning a big financial move like buying a house or something.
Oh, that's a great reminder. Wouldn't want any surprises popping up when I'm trying to get a mortgage. So, yearly checkups, screenshot evidence, what else?
Don't forget about the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're like the superheroes of consumer finance, seriously. If a credit bureau is being difficult about a clear mistake, you can file a complaint with the CFPB, and they'll have your back.
Okay, awesome. I'm definitely adding them to my list of resources. Good to know there's backup if things get tricky. So we've covered the basics of common errors, how to dispute them, and some key strategies. Anything else I should know before we move on to the next level of this credit report labyrinth?
It's funny you mentioned buying a house. That brings up a really important point that I think a lot of people don't realize. Like, credit reports aren't just about loans.
Wait, really? I thought that was like their main purpose.
Yeah, loans are a big part of it for sure. But like we touched on earlier, these reports kind of have these like tentacles that reach into other areas of your life too. Some of these sources actually talk about how landlords will use credit reports to screen potential tenants.
No way, seriously. So a credit report error could actually affect where I live.
Totally possible. A landlord could see like an inaccurate late payment or a debt that's not even yours and think twice about renting to you.
That's kind of freaky. It's like this one document holds the key to so many doors in life.
It really shows you how connected things
Oh, yeah.
are, right? And it's not just housing either. Some employers, especially in finance, they look at credit reports during the hiring process.
Whoa, I did not know that. I mean, it makes sense in a way, but it also feels a little, I don't know, unfair. Like, should my credit history really dictate whether I can get a job?
It's definitely a controversial topic, yeah. Some people argue it's a fair way to, like, assess responsibility and stuff, while others say it unfairly hurts certain groups of people.
It definitely adds another layer of, like, complexity to the whole credit report thing.
For sure. And it actually connects to something really interesting that one of the articles you sent brought up. It talked about the psychology behind credit scores and how this fear of a low score can actually influence people's behavior.
Oh, that's fascinating. What do you mean?
Well, they argue that this constant worry about your credit score can lead to, like, financial anxiety, makes people second guess their spending decisions or avoid taking risks that could actually be good for them in the long run.
That makes total sense. It's like this fear of judgment from the credit score gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're so focused on keeping that score high that you forget about, like, the bigger picture of your actual financial well-being.
Right. It's like you're trapped on this, like, credit score hamster wheel, constantly running but not really getting anywhere.
Okay, yeah. I'm definitely feeling the need to break free from that hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm.
But how? What can we do to, like, reclaim our financial power and not be ruled by these scores?
Well, I think a big part of it is understanding how these scores are actually calculated. It's not some magic formula, It's based on specific factors, and once you know what those factors are, you can start to, like, influence them in a positive way.
All right, let's demystify this credit score calculation then. What are the key ingredients that go into this score?
So the most common model is the FICO score, and it considers things like your payment history, the amount of debt you have, the length of your credit history, the types of credit you use, and any new credit inquiries.
Okay, that's a lot to take in. It's like a credit score recipe with all these different ingredients.
Aha, yeah, exactly. And each ingredient has a different weight, Like your payment history is the most important, followed by the amounts owed.
So basically, paying your bills on time and keeping your debt manageable are the two most important things when it comes to credit scores.
You got it. And one of the sources actually had this really interesting discussion about, like, the limitations of traditional credit scoring methods. It argues that they don't always give you a complete or accurate picture of a person's financial health.
Oh, interesting. What kind of limitations are we talking about?
Well, for example, the traditional FICO score doesn't take into account things like income, savings habits, or even your earning potential. It's really focused on debt, which can be kind of misleading.
That's true. You could have a low credit score because you're young and just starting out, but you could also have a great income and be super responsible with your money.
Exactly. And that's why there's this growing movement towards including alternative data points in credit scoring models.
Ooh, alternative data points. That sounds cool. What kind of data are we talking about here?
Well, some lenders are starting to experiment with looking at things like utility bill payments, rent payments, even your subscriptions like Netflix or Spotify.
Wait, seriously, my Netflix subscription could actually help my credit score. That's crazy.
It's still in the early stages, but the idea is that those consistent payments show responsible financial behavior, even if they're not traditionally included on a credit report.
That's fascinating. So the future of credit scoring could be a lot more, like, holistic, looking at the bigger picture of how we manage our money.
Totally. It's about going beyond just debt and looking at the whole spectrum of financial behavior.
Okay, so we've talked about the psychology of credit scores, the limits of the traditional models, and the potential for these alternative data points. It's a lot to take in, but before we get too lost in the theory, I want to circle back to the practical stuff.
Sounds good. What were you thinking?
Well, we've covered the major types of credit report errors, but the sources you sent also mentioned some lesser-known errors that can really trip people up.
You're right. Yeah, we should definitely unpack some of those more obscure but equally important errors.
Exactly. Because the more we know about these potential pitfalls, the better equipped we'll be to, like, navigate this credit report labyrinth.
I agree. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to our finances. So let's start with one that can be particularly tricky. Mixed files.
Mixed files. Okay, that sounds kind of ominous. What does that even mean?
Basically, it's when information from someone else, like with a similar name or social security number, gets mixed up with your credit file. It's a type of identity error, but it can be harder to spot because it might not be as obvious as a totally wrong name or address.
Oh, wow.
So it's like partial identity theft.
Right.
where bits and pieces of someone else's credit history are, like, blended with mine.
It's kind of like that, yeah. And it can be a real pain to sort out because you might not even realize it's happening until you see some unfamiliar accounts or inquiries on your report.
That's a little scary. It's like having a financial doppelganger out there whose actions are affecting my credit.
Haha. That's a good way to put it. And it really highlights why it's so important to carefully review every single detail on your credit report, not just the big things.
Okay, so mixed files, check. What other hidden dangers are lurking in these credit reports?
Another one to watch out for is incorrect public records. These are things like bankruptcies, tax liens, or judgments, which can obviously have a big impact on your credit score.
Yeah, I can see how those would be major red flags for lenders. But how do errors even happen with public records? I thought that information was, like, official and stuff. You'd think so, right? But sometimes there can be clerical errors, or a record might get accidentally linked to someone with a similar name. And sometimes outdated info can stay on your report even after it's been resolved, which is really frustrating.
So even if a public record has been cleared, it could still be, like, haunting my credit report.
Unfortunately, yeah, it's possible. That's why it's so important to check your report regularly and make sure that any public records listed are accurate and up to date.
Okay, adding public records to my list of things to double check. Any other sneaky errors we need to watch out for?
There are a few more, but one that's especially relevant these days is incorrect account status. This is when an account is listed as open when it's actually closed, or the other way around.
Okay, I can see how that would be confusing, but why is it such a big deal? How does it actually affect my credit?
Well, if an account is wrongly marked as open, it could make your credit utilization look worse than it really is. And on the flip side, if a closed account is mistakenly shown as open, it can mess with the average age of your credit accounts, which is another thing that affects your score.
Wow, it's amazing how these seemingly small details can have such a big impact on our credit scores. It's like a delicate ecosystem where one wrong move can throw everything off balance.
That's a great way to think about it. And it just goes to show why being informed and proactive is so crucial when it comes to managing our credit.
All right, so we've got mixed files, incorrect public records, and incorrect account statuses added to our list of potential credit report errors. Anything else we should be on the lookout for?
Definitely. One that's super relevant in our digital world is unauthorized inquiries.
Unauthorized inquiries. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Basically, it's when a lender or creditor checks your credit without your permission. Every time someone checks your credit, it leaves a little mark on your report.
Oh, so too many inquiries can make me look like I'm, desperate for credit or something.
That's kind of the idea, yeah. A couple inquiries here and there aren't a big deal. But if your report suddenly shows a bunch of inquiries you didn't authorize, it can raise red flags for lenders.
So how can we protect ourselves from these unauthorized inquiries? Is there any way to, prevent them from happening?
Well, a big thing is being careful who you share your personal information with. Don't give out your social security number or credit card details to just anyone, you know?
Right, it's all about being selective and protecting that sensitive data. What about those pre-approved credit card offers that come in the mail? Do those count as inquiries?
Good question. Those are actually considered soft inquiries, which don't affect your credit score at all.
Okay, good to know. So soft inquiries are fine, but hard inquiries, the ones that happen when you actually apply for credit, those can leave a mark on my report.
Exactly. And while some hard inquiries are unavoidable, like when you're applying for a mortgage or a car loan, you should always be aware of any inquiries that you didn't personally initiate.
Got it. So if I see an unfamiliar inquiry on my report, what should I do?
First, just try to remember if you applied for credit with that company at all. If not, you have the right to dispute that inquiry with the credit bureau.
Okay, adding that to my credit report action plan. So we've covered mixed files,
Yeah.
incorrect public records, incorrect account statuses, and unauthorized inquiries. It's amazing how much complexity there is in these reports.
I know, right? It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. There's always more to discover.
And speaking of peeling back the layers, there's one more common credit report error I want to touch on before we move on. This one can be particularly tricky to catch. Data management errors.
Ah, yes. Data management errors. Those are like the gremlins of the credit reporting world, often caused by like system glitches or mistakes in how data is processed and reported.
So, not necessarily malicious or intentional, but still capable of causing some serious damage to our credit reports.
Exactly. And these errors can show up in different ways, like wrong dates, missing information, or even data that just doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so if I see weird inconsistencies or things that just don't add up, it could be a data management error.
It's definitely a possibility, and it's important to remember that they can be just as harmful as those more obvious errors we talked about.
Got it. So vigilance is key. We need to be carefully checking every detail of our reports, looking for any red flags or anything that seems out of place.
That's exactly right. It's all about being an informed and active participant in your own credit journey. Don't just assume the information is correct. Take the time to understand it, question it, and if you need to, challenge it.
All right. I'm feeling ready to take on the credit bureaus. But before I go on a credit report crusade, are there any tips or strategies that can help me, avoid these errors in the first place?
Oh, absolutely. Prevention is always better than a cure, right? And there are definitely things you can do to minimize the risk of these errors popping up on your report.
Okay, so let's talk proactive measures. What can I do to keep those credit reports clean and accurate?
Well, first and foremost, be really diligent about monitoring your accounts. Regularly check your credit card statements, bank statements, any financial accounts, really, and look for any discrepancies.
So don't just skim over the totals. I actually need to look at individual transactions and make sure everything's accurate.
You got it. And if you see anything that seems off, don't hesitate to contact the creditor or financial institution right away.
It's better to be safe than sorry, right? Catch those potential errors early, like with any health issue.
Exactly. Preventative care for your credit, I love it.
Okay, so monitoring accounts, double-checking for errors, and reporting anything suspicious. What else?
Another big one is being mindful of your personal information. Be careful about who you share your social security number, credit card info, and stuff like that with.
Right, protect that data. Don't just give it away to anyone. What about all those online quizzes and surveys that ask for personal information? Should I avoid those?
It's best to be cautious about sharing personal details online, especially if you don't really know the website or organization. Think before you click that submit button.
Okay, so I need to be my own data guardian. Got it.
Exactly. And while we're talking about protection, watch out for phishing scams and other attempts to steal your identity.
Those phishing emails can be so sneaky. They look so real, but they're really just trying to steal my information.
Totally. So always double check the sender's address, look for any typos or weird wording, and if anything feels off, don't click on any links or open any attachments.
All right, I'll be on high alert for those phishing scams. So we've got monitoring accounts, protecting personal info, and being cautious online. Anything else I can do to prevent errors?
Keeping good records is always a good idea. This would be payment confirmations, receipts, basically anything that can help you verify your transactions.
Like building a paper trail for my finances.
Exactly. And if an error does happen, having those records will make the dispute process so much easier. It's like having all your ducks in a row, ready to present your case.
I love that. Organization is key. Got to be a record-keeping ninja.
Yes. And since we're talking about being proactive, make it a habit to review your credit report on a regular basis.
We talked about getting those free reports every year, but should I be checking them even more often than that?
It doesn't hurt, especially if you've had any big life changes recently, like moving or changing jobs. You can even sign up for credit monitoring services. They'll alert you to any changes or suspicious activity on your report.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to make it a priority to stay on top of my credit reports. It's like a financial checkup, making sure everything is running smoothly.
Exactly. And remember, if you do find an error, don't freak out. Just take a deep breath, gather your evidence, and follow those dispute steps we talked about earlier.
And if I hit a wall or start feeling lost, I can always reach out to the CFPB for help, right? They're like the credit report cavalry, ready to come to the rescue.
That's right. You're not alone in this. There are resources and people who can help you through this, and make sure your credit report is telling the right story about your finances.
Okay, I'm feeling a lot more confident about this whole credit report thing. We've learned about common errors, the psychology behind credit scores, and some really valuable strategies for prevention and dispute resolution. Is there anything else we should cover before we wrap up our deep dive into the world of credit reports?
You know, there is one really interesting aspect of credit reports that we haven't touched on yet, and it's something that's getting a lot of attention lately. It's called credit invisibility.
Credit invisibility. Okay, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Basically, it refers to people who have very little or no credit history, which makes them basically invisible to traditional credit scoring models.
Wow, that's a whole other layer of complexity. Who are these credit invisibles?
It could be young adults who are just starting out, immigrants who are new to the country, or people who have always used cash or alternative financial services.
So they might be financially responsible, but they just haven't had the chance to build a traditional credit history yet.
Exactly. And that can create a tough situation. They need credit to build credit, but without a credit history, they often can't get access to traditional financial products and services.
That's so unfair. It's like being punished for not playing the credit game, even if you're good with money.
It's definitely a challenge, and it's something that policymakers and financial institutions are starting to address. There's this growing understanding that the traditional credit scoring systems need to change to be more inclusive and account for a wider range of financial behaviors.
So the future of credit scoring could look very different from what we know today.
It's totally possible. There's a lot of innovation happening in the world of fintech, and companies are coming up with new ways to assess creditworthiness and give access to financial services to people who have been excluded in the past.
That's really encouraging. It's like we're on the verge of a credit revolution, moving towards a system that's more fair and accessible for everyone.
I love that way of looking at it. It's a really exciting time to be paying attention to this stuff.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground today. From common errors to the psychology of credit scores to the future of credit invisibility, it's been a real deep dive into this complex world of credit reports.
It really has, and I think we've managed to break down this complicated topic in a way that's both informative and hopefully empowering for our listeners.
Totally agree. We didn't just explain how credit reports work, but we also emphasized why it's so important to be informed, proactive, and, just aware of your credit health.
Absolutely. Your credit report is a powerful tool, and just like any tool, it needs to be used wisely and responsibly.
Okay, so to everyone listening, we encourage you to check your credit report, understand your rights, and be proactive about managing your credit.
And remember, there are resources out there to help you. Don't hesitate to reach out to credit counseling agencies, consumer protection organizations, or even financial experts if you need guidance.
That's a great point. We're all in this together, and there's no shame in asking for help when it comes to our finances.
For sure. Financial literacy is a journey, not a destination, and we're all learning and growing along the way.
Okay, I love that. That's a perfect note to end on. But before we go, I have one last question for our listeners to think about. If you could add one piece of information to credit reports to make them more accurate and fair, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm curious to hear what everyone comes up with.
Me too. Let us know your thoughts on social media or on our website. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep your money working for you. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
That's a tough one, right? It's like, what would make the perfect financial recipe? There's so many things to consider.
I know, but it's a fun thought experiment.
Huh.
What about you? If you had that magic wand, what would you add?
That's a good question. I think for me, it'd be something about financial resilience, like credit reports are so focused on debt, but what about someone's ability to bounce back from a financial setback?
Oh, that's interesting. So not just how much debt you have, but how you handle tough financial times. Like, do you have an emergency fund? Do you make sure to pay your bills on time even when things are tight?
Exactly. Those are qualities that don't always show up on a regular credit score, but I think they matter a lot, both for individuals and for lenders.
Yeah, I totally agree. We give you a much better understanding of someone's overall financial picture. It's like credit reports tell us the what, but we need the how and the why to really get the full story.
Exactly. It's about adding that context, that depth to the data.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. Any final words of wisdom before we sign off?
Just this. Your credit report is a tool. And like any tool, you got to know how to use it. Stay informed and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself if you see something wrong.
That's great advice. So to recap, for everyone listening at home, know your rights, check your report regularly, and if something seems off, dispute it.
And if you're ever feeling lost or overwhelmed, remember those resources we talked about, like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're there to help you navigate this stuff.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for our deep dive into credit report errors. We hope you learned a lot and maybe even feel a little more empowered to take control of your credit.
We did our best to make it clear and helpful. It's a topic that can feel really intimidating, but with a little knowledge and effort, you can totally manage your credit and build a solid financial future.
Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep your money working for you. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
If this podcast helped you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep making these videos. Thanks for watching.